Who do you want to be today? When we are children, we're encouraged to play. We're told as adults and as parents that play is healthy and that creative fantasy, role play, and learning how to imagine, and more importantly, being given permission to imagine, are crucial for healthy development. Some of that playfulness will often include acting out imaginary characters or things we might aspire to. In one of my elementary schools, there was a whole area of the classroom devoted to block play, where a group of students would have free rein to create a whole city with the building blocks. This was always my favorite activity. I was fascinated with the way the different buildings that other kids created would intersect and align with other buildings or not. I would always bring my toy Matchbox cars to drive around the space. It was 8-year-old city planning at its best. The most marvelous thing about this space was that we had the freedom to imagine, what do we want to be today? Why do we ever stop asking that question? Sometimes there's a lot of emphasis put on how the human brain is not fully formed until someone is about 25 years old. Well, that's nice, but does that mean that's it? Worse, does it mean that it's all downhill from there? Does it mean we're fixed in one place, one way of thinking from then on? Dare I say, being fixed in one way of being locked into a kind of orthodoxy of self, feels like short-circuiting human potential. Whether we want it or not, our bodies are always changing. From conception through death, our bodies are constantly in motion and evolution and regeneration and deterioration. Why shouldn't our minds do the same? And more importantly, why shouldn't our spirits do the same? Once we hit this magic 25-year moment, I think we're told to think somehow we have arrived. In a world driven by commercial interests, we're given the very potent message that we should desire a kind of set life and lifestyle where we will have a specific kind of consistency. That consistency is represented by relationships, intimate and otherwise, physical health, financial security, and career trajectory. But the person who remains in a single relationship, career, and health status from 25 until death is rare. Certainly, most people's wealth fluctuates wildly over the course of a lifetime. Truth be told, many of the conversations I've had with people going through life changes, the ones that they have no control over, are conversations that talk about the secret desires for change that sit well outside of these expectations. The secret desire for a different partner, or less dependence on a certain kind of income, better health, and always some kind of other career. I feel as if we're encouraged to fit ourselves into boxes of how we understand who we are that get harder and harder to break out of the older we get. When we are very small children, we resist going to sleep. We don't want to miss any of what life is giving us from moment to moment. Even into young adulthood, we will spend hours hanging on to a day or an experience or a moment with friends. Then something changes as we're growing older, and we suddenly can't wait to get to sleep at the end of the day. Where does our appetite for experience go? At the same time, we get tired and uneager to experience new things. There's also a hunger to revert or recapture what once was, like going backward to something that we have nostalgia for. People going to the gym will often talk about wanting to get back their high school or college body, wanting to look and feel like they're physically invincible. There's that pre-25-year-old thing. And so they lift weights and change diets, trying to recapture a prior magic. Funny how they've forgotten about all of the awkwardness and unexpected messes and rashes and strains and sprains and breaks that accompanied that younger body as it bent and flexed through all of its growing changes. These conflicting impulses to resist change while holding on to the past in our own bodies also show up in politics and in neighborhoods and schools. Overall, I would say that change is not something our culture teaches us to do very well. But here's the thing. We don't have a choice in the matter. We are going to age whether we like it or not. Tomorrow is going to be different than today. We are going to feel differently about who and what we are from moment to moment. The only choice we have is how and how graciously we're going to ride these waves, not how big or small the waves will be or how fast or slow. There's a beautiful lesson that every physical artist must learn. Inflexibility equals injury. If your body is rigid to the forces of inertia, impact, etc., it will be injured. Joints must be supple. Muscles must be fluid. Systems of creating power and energy must have elasticity. Without these qualities, the body breaks. To me, this is the most important lesson that anyone in a human body can learn. It has awesome application across many aspects of life. Indeed, young bodies prove this time and again, and we marvel at how they literally bounce back after an accident or injury. That's because they haven't learned how to tense up and get rigid and resistant yet. There is a basic trust in being that exists in young bodies that lets them literally roll with the punches. In a world that is changing at a breakneck pace, I wonder if we can embrace a little bit of that. It's not like we've never known how to be flexible. It's mostly that so many of us have forgotten how. Is there maybe an opportunity to shift our way of thinking about our growth and development, whatever age or stage we are at, so that it is less about destinations and more about journeys? What if we are able to receive the ways in which the world changes as less about movement away from something familiar and receive the change as being more about the movement itself? Concern ourselves with asking and understanding why before getting hung up on what. We are asked to change in so many different ways. Some ways are pretty tame. Hairstyles or clothing, music, language even. These are changes that we experience with little struggle or grief. But then there are bigger changes that can be more difficult for people. Although the First Parish in Cambridge community does this pretty well, offering our pronouns in introductions is surprisingly difficult for some people. For some people who have the invisible privilege of an embodied experience that aligns with the assumptions of binary gender and sexuality, the question I get is always, why? I once watched the offering of pronouns devolve into a harmful carelessness, and this was in a gathering of people of color. The cisgender men, gay and straight, started to make a joke out of it. Eventually, someone insisted that we start again and do it right and respectfully. Accessibility, whether it is physical, intellectual, or emotional, is an awareness that requires both an investment of time and organizational energy that might feel to someone who doesn't need these awarenesses like some kind of waste. But in a culture of real equity, the goal is to lift all boats on the water, not just the most readily buoyant. Certainly, we have seen and continue to see changes in how people understand race and racism. Where I know many people, even folks listening to this message, at one time bristled at the language of white supremacy. there has been a gradual understanding of how important it is to name this language in order to identify and deal with the real problems that a culture built around whiteness creates for those who sit outside of that identity. These are all challenges and changes in our lives that require suppleness, flexibility, and some fluidity. What is more, ultimately, we are all better for these changes. You are all becoming every single day. The only fixed point of completeness for us is when this journey is over, and even then, we continue in miraculous ways. And folks, embracing our capacity to change and evolve begins with remembering that play is still something important in our lives. The child that created a whole world on a beach, or crafted a jet plane out of a piece of paper, or drew a solar system with a blue crayon, is still part of you. You didn't stop growing when you turned 25, and if you aren't yet 25, don't worry. That date will not mark the end of the road. We all get the awesome opportunity and privilege of becoming our whole lives. We just need to stay in practice. Always being flexible enough to make the leap, physical or mental, from here to there, supple enough to absorb the impact of a rough landing, and fluid enough to heal any wounds that may occur. Keep on becoming every day. Start the day by asking yourself, who do I want to be today? You may be surprised by who that turns out to be. May it be so.